22nd. We will now resume proceedings in Finance Committee. And today we'll be considering the appropriations to the Deputy Governor. But before we do so, I'll ask the Premier to lead us in prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Shall we pray? Dear Father, as we come before you on another morning at the commencement of the Finance Committee, we ask you to pour your blessings upon us as your servants and upon the country as a whole. Guide our deliberations. Give us wisdom, judgment, patience, and tolerance as we seek to do the country's work. All this we ask in thy dear Son's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Premier. You may be seated. CIB 1, policy advice to the head of the civil service for $1,495,263. Are there any questions? Page 261. Mr. Bush? Mr. Miller? Mr. Bush? Mr. Bush?
Mr. Chairman, if you look through government, you would find some challenged people that work for various areas in government. And I think the governments over the years have done a fair job in hiring people that are challenged differently. But we have some that, let's see, and I know what the situation is with trying to keep expenditure in check and the civil service from growing. So when people work for 20 years, 25 years, the same salary, they're partly handicapped persons. I was wondering if the deputy governor can say if they would, and I don't expect an answer unless he can, but this morning, but if he can look at the situation of persons who are physically challenged or in let's say partly handicapped persons in some shape or form, if he can look to see how many government got, and even if it's only two, if he can find a way to assist them, because some of them, if not all, but I know, have families, have children. A few is very much under pressure by banks on their homes. I'm gonna speak directly to him about one, but I know of others that have spoken, and find a way to put them in a special category, separate and apart from a normal civil servant rules. And I don't know how much he can do. I would suspect that you can find a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. And hopefully that he would be able to help them. I won't take it any further than that, but there are some cases that needs attention.
Thank you,
As
Mr. Bush.
I said, I'm going to talk to him about one case that I know.
Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Mr. Chairman, now I have several questions in regard to what's happening in various areas in terms of staff. When I had customs, when customs were here under your ministry, Mr. Chairman, this was put off. But I do want to find out what changes in customs and why the recent change, and he can navigate around it as best as he can without divulging confidential, personal information. But certainly when it comes to the overall, and we spoke a while ago about it, I certainly would like to know what the situation is.
Thank you. Mr. Deputy Governor, did you want to answer the question on the handicapped employees first?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yes, I'll do both. Good morning. Franz Manderson, Deputy Governor and Head of the Civil Service. And I thank Mr. Bush for those questions. Mr. Chairman, through you, we are very proud that we can offer employment to a number of persons with disabilities. As I walk around the government administration building, I see persons there, and it's really proud for us that we are able to expand our employment opportunities for those persons. But Mr. Bush is right. We will have now persons in the civil service who have been, their pay has been frozen for quite some time. That is across the board. I'm very pleased to say that in this budget, being now considered, there is some bespoke funding to deal with pay inequity and pay stagnation. And we will be implementing that as soon as is feasible possible in terms of once the budget is approved and we can go ahead. And we've already identified the persons who this affects, and it does affect persons across the civil service, including persons with disabilities. So certainly I can give an undertaking to Mr. Bush to make sure that we look at those persons as a group in terms for pay stagnation, but also in a special way, because as he said, where there's a will, there's a way, and I would be very, very happy to consider having some type of special policy to deal with those persons, because the fact that they are out, working despite their disabilities is something that we should commend them for and support them. Moving on, Mr. Chairman, through you, we've had two persons in the Customs Department who has retired. That was an agreement between themselves and the collective. They have served with the government for many, many years. Their departure will now allow for other Caymanians in the Customs Service to move up. I'm very proud to say that a number of customs officers have gone back to school, has upgraded their education, and now I'm hoping, well, I have no doubt that as a result of these recent departures, we will have some Caymanians moving up in the civil service. Mr. Chairman, just to say that those persons will be retiring on the 1st of July. The Customs Department has been, and their staff has been informed, and I want to sincerely thank all those two persons for their excellent service over the years, and to wish them well in their retirement.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't know the numbers, but why? How are they moving on? I mean, they're not pensionable. At this point, the age should be pensionable.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Deputy Governor.
And Mr. Chairman, like I said, I don't really want to get into the specifics, but I can assure the member that they are being retired with their full benefits. So they're not losing anything. And that's really all I want to say right now.
I'm not going to press the member for information that can't be divulged at this time and perhaps should not be divulged publicly, but are you setting a precedent of any kind that the next custom person, anytime you know, Mr. Chairman, I admit publicly I do not get involved with civil service matters. I told civil service matters in 1985, look, you have told me you don't want me handling your firing, your hiring, and I stay clear of it. I don't. But then when you get in problems, who you run to is us. And that's a fact. And that's a problem overall, age-old problem with civil servants. Politicians, we don't want you dealing with us. But as soon as something happens, it is us they come to. We are their friend, their elected, their family, all different kind of reasons. My concern would be in any situation like this, you get a lowering of morale because simply full staff don't know the reasons why. It's not divulged to full staff, right? And so they start to get uneasy about the whole situation, and am I next, and that sort. I don't need to speak to the Deputy Governor about that. He's been here long enough to know what I'm talking about, and he's certainly been in this post long enough, but he's been a civil servant long enough to understand the feelings of civil servants, and then on management side now, understand that situation.
Thank you, Mr. Bush.
In the suspension of civil servants, I'm not saying retired now, suspension. Yes. How many civil servants are suspended?
Mr. Chairman, through you, the number of civil servants who are on suspension right now is 31.
31? And what would you say are dire consequences? The worst case scenario of anyone?
Mr. Chairman, through you, the worst case scenario would be as a result of an investigation in a court case that it will be a separation from the civil service. There will be the employment will be terminated. That is the max.
There are no criminal charges then?
Yes. So, Mr. Chairman, there are some persons who have been suspended just recently. Allegations have been made. We're investigating. There are some who are before the court. That makes up, I think, the majority of persons who are before the court. They're waiting on their court cases. If they are convicted, then they can be terminated from the civil service. The employment can be terminated. If they are exonerated, then they can be taken back. If the investigation or the allegations made against them were not criminal, there were other breaches of discipline, then that can also result in termination, or they could come back into the service, they could be warned. There's a number of different options that we have.
And are there any cases that, what's the longest standing one, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, there is one that is before the court that I don't hold me to exact times, but I believe has been pending in the courts for about 4 years.
Pending for 4 years. That's the longest one.
That's correct. And Mr. Chairman, as you know, we have no control over the court, so we have to wait for the court proceedings to be completed.
Mr. Bush.
One more on, I think that impinges on the vote, Mr. Chairman. It is to do with the Premier's ministry, but it's immigration. And I gather the Deputy Governor can answer. On the regulations made for acknowledging same-sex partners, has any regulation been made?
Mr. Chairman, through you, no, sir.
And is there any before cabinet to be made?
Mr. Chairman, I have not seen anything on our cabinet agenda.
Then what is happening with the matter? I mean, it had sufficient publicity here and in the papers in regards to that issue of the gentleman who was seeking that immigration situation.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if the member or the committee know that Dr. Raznovich and his partner, James, I can't remember his last name now, actually appealed the decision of the immigration board not to add his partner, or not to add him as a dependent to his partner's work permit. And that appeal has recently been heard by the Immigration Appeals Tribunal. And I am told that a decision should be forthcoming very shortly, perhaps this week.
So they made an application or appealed the first decision. So it's
Yes.
before the appeals tribunal now then.
Yes, and the appeal has now been heard.
So no regulation were needed to be made then.
We don't know that.
Oh, you're waiting on the outcome of the tribunal's decision.
Right.
Before a decision is made, how are you going to treat the matter?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Premier. I had 3 questions over there. I had Mr. Miller, Mr. McLean, Mr. Connolly. How do you all want, who wants to go first? Well, I saw Mr. Miller first. He was there trying to get my attention when Mr. Bush started his question. So Mr. Miller has given way to you, Mr. McLean. Mr. Miller?
To you, Mr. Chairman, I have some general policy questions. I don't know whether you want the Deputy Governor wants me to deal with it now, or you want me to deal with under auditing compliance with the PM. I said I can deal with it now.
Mr. Chairman, that's fine, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
As I understand it, the appeal for civil servants for decisions that they regard are not in their favor is to the Civil Service Appeals Commission. I think you call it CSAC, right?
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, sir.
Okay. Is there any regulation, policy, or guideline that allows a chief officer to ignore a decision of the Civil Service Appeals Commission?
Deputy
Mr. Chairman, no, sir.
Is there any rule, regulation, or policy that allows a chief officer to refuse to obey or to comply with a decision of the Civil Service Appeals Commission?
Deputy Governor.
Mr. Chairman, through you, no, sir.
Do you regard such action by a chief officer as misconduct? Either, I think the Civil Service Management Law talks to 2 forms of misconduct: gross misconduct or minor misconduct. Do you regard that action by a chief officer falls under either of those?
Mr. Chairman, it would be difficult for me to say. I would, if a chief officer or any civil servant deliberately, without explanation, simply refused to carry out a decision of the CSAC, then I would consider that misconduct, and we would obviously investigate the matter. But I'm not aware of any case like that.
Would you agree that refusal to comply with a ruling of CSAC repeatedly over a 2-year or greater with multiple requests to comply as gross misconduct?
Just so I understand, Mr. Chairman, multiple requests from the CSAC for the ruling, for their judgment to be enforced?
No, from the civil servant whose judgment CSAC was in favor of, from his requesting that the chief officer comply with the decision of CSAC.
Deputy Governor, do you understand?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I mean, Mr. Chairman, I know the case the member's talking about.
I'm not talking about a special case, we're talking general policy here now. But you know where we're going to get.
Mr. Chairman, speaking hypothetically, if a that's what we were doing.
Members, if I could ask that you all
Yes.
let him answer,
Speaking
please.
hypothetically, if the CSAC, who is one of our oversight bodies, makes a decision, the person who is required to carry out the decision fails to do so, the civil servant comes to them repeatedly, as the member says, and says, can you do it? Can you carry out the judgment? And the chief officer blatantly refuses, then I would consider that misconduct, because they are failing to carry out a decision of one of our oversight bodies. The same would apply to the complaints commissioner, information commissioner, all of those things.
Thank you, Deputy Governor.
Is the alternative to the chief officer for non-compliance with CSAC decision to appeal the decision if he's not going to accept it to court, and is that time barred?
Yes, that would be something that would be open to, Mr. Chairman, sorry, through you, that would be an option that's available to the relevant civil servant. They could judicially review the CSAC. And yes, I think there is a time frame for that to happen.
If such a situation was to occur, where a chief officer continued to refuse to implement but did not appeal, would that not confirm that the decision not to comply is deliberate?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure I can answer that. That's very,
That's a
the
good enough
members asked
answer
me
for
to
the
get in the
record from
mind
you,
of the
Mr.
person.
Chair.
I
Okay.
can't do that.
Okay. But it would be your expectation that any person promoted to the position of chief officer would know that that is the alternative available to him
It's
for ask for judicial review.
It's one of the alternatives, absolutely. Not the only one.
I know that. What are the consequences, if any, that exist for civil servants who come to Finance Committee and misinform Finance Committee when questioned?
Mr. Chairman, if it would be on the facts of the case. For example, if I just said here that I think the longest person that has been on required leave was 4 years, and you checked in and it turned out to be 4.5 years or 5 years, technically, I may have misinformed the committee. But that was not deliberate. I gave you my guess, and I qualified what I said. I believe, don't hold me to it. But if someone came here and had the information in front of them, for example, and then deliberately misinformed the committee, and that was proven that they had deliberately disrespected or misinformed this committee, that would be a serious breach of the Civil Service Code of Conduct, and they would be subject to disciplinary action.
And how is that disciplinary action actioned by a member of the Legislative Assembly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, I would expect or the appointing officer, so if it was a chief officer, then it would be me. If it was another civil servant, then maybe the chief officer, should receive a complaint, setting out in writing, setting out what exactly the allegations are, any evidence to corroborate that. That would be presented to the person. They would be given a chance then to respond. They have to know what they're being accused of. It would have to be a fair hearing. And after a hearing in accordance with the Public Service Management Law, a decision would be taken.
Would a written complaint from a member of the Legislative Assembly, substantiated by copies of the Hansard, be sufficient to trigger action?
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Thank you, Deputy Governor. Mr. McLean?
Mr. Chairman, I thank you, sir. I wonder if the Deputy Governor can say which one I got to be talking about now. Mr. Chairman, I was mindful this morning to ask of your permission to recall some people, but the revelation here may change that, because I have come into information that suggests that evidence given here yesterday was either misleading or deliberately misrepresented. However, since that revelation, I will hold my blaze on that until I hear about some of the other stuff that I would like to question the Deputy Governor on. Mr. Chairman, and I want to get the record set straight prior to starting what I'm about to start. And in doing so, I wish to bring to the attention of this committee sections from the Constitution, subsections from section 7 to 1, which talks about standing orders and committees. Subsection 6, starting at subsection 6. Standing orders shall make provisions for the establishment of a finance committee of the Legislative Assembly to consider in detail estimates of revenue and expenditures of the Cayman Islands laid before the Assembly by the Minister responsible for finance, and to examine and consider all financial bills and such other matters relating to the finances of the Cayman Islands as may from time to time be referred to it by the Assembly, and to report on them to the Assembly. 8. Standing orders may also establish one or more other standing committees of the Legislature, each of which may be charged with the responsibility for monitoring the conduct of business of the government for which responsibility has been assigned to ministers under Section 54. The composition of all such standing committees shall, so far as possible, reflect proportionately the numerical strength of all political parties or groups making up the elected membership of the Legislative Assembly. Any standing committee so established shall have power to summon any minister, the deputy governor, the attorney general, or any public officer of a department of government for which a minister is responsible to appear before it, and to require any minister or the person so summoned to answer questions and provide information about the conduct of business of the government by the minister or department concerned, or as the case may be, the deputy governor, the attorney general, and to report it on its activities to the Legislative Assembly. Just for the purposes of what I'm going to do. Mr. Chairman, the deputy governor said that there were some 30-odd people suspended. I would like to go to the one, and I think suspended or fired in this case. The one that we have questioned for quite some time, the prison with those cameras. And I would like to know, because when I first questioned it, the deputy governor said that it was sub judice. We established that wasn't so. But the second time, the deputy governor said that it was appealed, the decision of the chief officer, because I believe the chief officer had erred and gone against statute and fired someone, which he had no authority. The deputy governor then told us that the government was vigorously pursuing, objecting to judicial review that had commenced. Can the deputy governor tell us the outcome of all those cases?
Mr. Chairman, just to say that I don't agree with the member's summation of all the things that I said. So I certainly never said anything about sub judice. I think that was his words.
Mr. Chairman, we can stop and get the handsets. We can stop. The first time I questioned it, you tried saying that it was appealed and it was sub judice and it should not be questioned here in the Legislative Assembly. And I said it had to be proven that it was sub judice.
Mr. Chairman, we can look at the records. I just do not remember ever saying that word. Would I have implied that those matters were before the courts, or that they were being further taken forward or under appeal? Yes, but I don't ever remember saying that word. But I'm not going to mince words with that. The member has asked for an update on the cases, and I can give an update. One person, following a hearing, has been reinstated, and their contract has come to an end, and they have left the civil service. The other person who was before the courts, there is ongoing negotiations with their attorney, and that has not been finalized as yet.
Thank you, Deputy Governor. Mr. McLean?
Mr. Chairman, can he explain ongoing negotiations if it's before the court?
Deputy Governor.
Mr. Chairman, obviously I don't want to get into details of what negotiations we are having with individual persons. But the matter is before the court. JR proceedings were filed. It's my understanding that our legal department is negotiating with the subject, the person who is on suspension with their attorney on a way forward.
You mean that is to be reinstated or to be paid out?
Deputy Governor?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not a, they, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to be, to not help the member, but I don't want to start getting into specific details about an ongoing matter that is being dealt with by our legal persons. I am more than happy, and I've always been open with every member of this House, but there's just so far that I can go, Mr. Chairman.
And, Mr. Chairman, that's why I use the Constitution as a precursor to my questions, because I know this will come up, because it just came up with the leader of the opposition. Here, questions needs to be answered. We take this place too lightly. Is it, and I expect answers, Mr. Chairman, that is my job. And no matter how many lawyers are here, that is my job on behalf of my people. Now, Mr. Chairman, I need to know which one is outstanding. Is it the woman that was alleged to have been fired? Not alleged. The papers reported on it. And I question it here, how a chief officer can be firing a prison officer when only the director can do that. Now I need to know, is it that woman?
Deputy Governor?
Mr. Chairman, I listened very carefully to what the member said and the Constitution. I saw nothing in there where it said that I am responsible to answer to him on HR matters. As a matter of fact, the Constitution says quite the opposite. So, Mr. Chairman, I am not going to, with the greatest respect, manage the civil service down here. There is a clear separation of powers, and I think we should all respect that. I have the greatest respect for this chamber, which I'm a part of. Members know that I will go out of my way to give them private briefings, which I have offered, which the member has not yet taken up. But I am not going to get into specific HR cases that are before the courts in this chamber. That cannot be right, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Governor.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McLean?
Maybe the deputy governor didn't listen carefully to what I said about in the Constitution. It says anything they are responsible for. If he is responsible for HR, then he must answer questions.
Mr. McLean, I've read the Constitution with respect to the section that you just spoke of. And I think what we may need is perhaps an interpretation from our legal advisor, which would be the Attorney General, because it says standing orders shall make provision for the establishment of a finance committee of the Legislative Assembly.
Which is a standing committee.
To consider in detail the estimates of revenue and expenditure of the Cayman Islands laid before the Assembly by the Minister responsible for finance, and to examine and consider all financial bills and such other matters relating to the finances of the Cayman Islands as may from time to time be referred to it by the Assembly, and to report on them to the Assembly. And then you went on to read subsection 8. Standing orders may also establish one or more other standing committees of the LA, the Legislative Assembly, each of which may be charged with responsibility for monitoring the conduct of business of the government for which responsibility has been assigned to administer under Section 54. So, by your own
Be
revelation,
careful.
by
Careful.
your own revelation, Mr. McLean, by referring us to the specific section, it speaks specifically to estimates of revenue and expenditure, not the disciplinary matters. So I am respectfully requesting that we seek legal advice as to the interpretation of the Constitution
Okay.
with respect to this particular matter.
Mr. Chairman, may I draw your attention to the description under policy advice to the head of civil service, where it says strategic human resource services.
And Mr. McLean, how would you interpret the word strategic in this context?
Well, it's human resources that he's responsible for. And the finances of that falls within the ambit of the finances of the country. And I have a right to question it.
Mr. McLean, I would respectfully request that if it is the information that you seek, perhaps the deputy governor may be willing to do so off air as opposed to.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, sir, we do too much things off here, and the public is no better informed. And it's unfortunate that these things happen. Mr. Chairman, just yesterday, I asked questions about people who were acting, which is, we have a right to ask. Acting at Public Works. There has been some there for 15 years. You heard them tell me, sir, that it was 3-4 years. Some for 5 years. Some of them for 5 years. And then you heard the deputy director, sir, says that he's retired, but he's leaving in 3 years, but he's on a 1-year contract. That's the kind of stuff that we do. You know what? Life comes to full circle for all of us. And at some stage, when it comes back, and the way we do, Mr. Chairman, there is no way, sir, and I must say this, the manner in which young Caymanians are treated within the service by department heads and chief officers, and the only way they are going to get justice is by their representatives, and that is us.
I agree with what you're saying, Mr. McLean, but at the same time, we cannot treat Finance Committee as a court. We have that ability within the regular sitting of our assembly meetings.
Mr. Chairman, I follow you, sir, but we don't get any questions and answers in the Legislative Assembly. There are many that has never been answered.
But, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, sir, I appreciate all that. But in the same token, what you are providing without deliberately providing it is the opportunity for the continuation of the blocking of information to get out to the public. That's all, sir. And I'm not saying you're doing it deliberately, sir. I'm not saying that. I wouldn't say that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, obviously, and it's a very interesting discussion because you pointed out in a matter of legal advice just now, you said were you going to seek legal advice yourself or the committee should?
I think for the benefit of the committee, perhaps it would be good if the whole committee could have the advice.
Well, the truth is that I try to.
I wouldn't want to seek the legal advice for myself and then others disagree.
No, if you seek it, Mr. Chairman, I would encourage you to share it, because in the past we have never really had or went into so much detail in civil service matters all over years. But the fact is, and I've respected that, as I said earlier, at least I've tried to say to the committee earlier my feelings about it since 1985. But the truth is that we are getting tremendous, and the deputy governor may be aware, if it's not, he needs to be aware, that we as elected representatives are getting tremendous queries, complaints at our doorstep from civil servants about every conceivable matter. And it does not seem, while yes, they have a vote, and yes, I am an elected representative, and certainly if I know of a situation, I'm going to query it or try to help the person in any shape or form I can. But there is only so much that we can do as elected representatives. And the civil service of this country needs to take that on board themselves. Because the truth is they are impacted by so many different situations. And so many different situations are thrown in our lap of all kinds. And when people like Mr. Arden come here and ask these things, it's not, I suspect, now we know he can be belligerent anything he wants, but the truth is that the truth is we are getting these questions, and the only way, we'll never get them in Parliament because it is at the will of the Speaker, who can go either direction on a question. They can give you 3, and they can stop you whenever they want to. And if you open up, then you are wrong as a member. Where else then do an elected member come to try? Because I say I do not have responsibility for the civil service matters. I don't have them. Unless somebody can show me something in the Constitution that I can do. And I've got, as a minister, past minister, premier, I've had many things thrown in my face. You did that, you did that, you did that. The truth is, I don't even know it existed. And you can say, well, what were you doing? But it's a fact. I have not over the years paid that kind of attention to civil service matters because I felt constitutionally I did not have or could not do anything about it. But the least I can do is to try to come here to the Finance Committee to ask. But the man over there is the man ultimately responsible for divulging any such information. And however he can circumvent the rules of that he figures he has, then where are we with the issue? I wish somebody would get a constitutional ruling as to where we are.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could help.
Yes, sir.
To me, it is not that a difficult exercise. The way how I understand, or have always understand, and in agreement with what the leader of the opposition was saying, is that I understand that civil servants will want to complain to their elected representatives. That is, I think, sometimes natural that they are who represents them in their district. But it is very clear from all the laws and the regulations and constitution that we do not want, I don't think anyone in this chamber wants, is a political civil service that is tied to political members. And I know that that's not what the member from East End or North Side or anyone in here is saying should happen. But that's the danger of taking this issue too far. How I believe the system should work, sir, is that if civil servants come to an elected member and say, here is what is happening to me, I believe that I am being victimized. I believe that I am not being given opportunities. I believe that I am guilty of maladministration. The elected member has many options. One is to bring that to my attention and hold me accountable for dealing with it. This parliament has a complaints commissioner that reports to them, that's oversight body, that reviews cases of maladministration in the civil service. send the people to those persons. But I do not believe that trying to solve these problems or these HR problems in finance committee in the LA is not in our best interest. So I would encourage members to follow how I understand that is supposed to work. And if that, the person to hold responsible, Mr. Chairman, is me. I am head of the civil service. If civil servants are being mistreated, they're not being given opportunities, then the person to hold responsible is me. And that's what should happen. I have a boss.
And
Thank
but
you.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you, Deputy Governor.
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
Bush.
the rub is that we come here with a budget before us, that we are expected to vote on it. And you cannot just vote and smite your inner being knowing that something is radical wrong and you're not getting through.
Yes.
While I said what I said earlier stands. I believe that I do not have the constitutional being to do what I think that constituents they are want us to do.
Right. And
Mr. Chairman, if I may, sir.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
But the vote is
And I don't want, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to disrespect anyone. But it's difficult for me. The chairman, the deputy governor said that I have not taken up the opportunity to be informed by him on occasion. I have been to one or two of those that he invited us. But I don't get any results. Just let me get that straight now, okay? There is no tangible results coming out of those other than for him, it gives him the opportunity that we don't question him elsewhere around here. That, I don't know if that's his intent, that may be it. When we follow the protocols, which I have followed, that he spoke about coming to him, there is no tangible results. I can recall one vividly in my mind, and nothing, absolutely nothing has happened.
you mean
So
what you
what-
don't want to happen?
Now, what won't happen? If the behavior continues, that means nothing has happened. Now, what won't happen? The behavior that you condemn, if that continues and you have already dealt with it, then nothing has happened. Mr. Chairman, and then Caymanians understand that heads of departments, when they retire, Caymanians sit down and see this, the lower ones. When they retire, the heads of department, they get wages, they put them on contract, get wages, and then they make them act for dead people so that they can get the acting allowance too. You really think that's fair to the Caymanians, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Chairman, and I am not to question that? Come on, that's what I was put here for.
Mr. McLean, one distinction. I don't think they're saying you're not to question as you did yesterday, and rightly so. The question is today about a matter that perhaps may or may not be in the legal process. So I am saying to you respectfully, if you would so kindly have an off-air, in-camera discussion with the deputy governor, you would have the information you so seek. And then as a representative, you can still act on that information. But what I'm trying to avoid is for us to turn finance committee into a court. And I will seek legal advice as to just how far, and perhaps it may be too late, given that this is the last budget that we'll present, and this is the last, Deputy Governor is now, not a minister, but responsible for the civil service. But for future finance committees in years to come, it may be beneficial to have some
But we won't
ruling.
have many of them.
Sorry?
We won't be having many of them here 2 years. So
You guys keep repeating the same thing over and over, and I'm going to say it once and for all so that you can understand and the public can hear it. We have said that we will put in law a finance committee process every year so that even though you would have done a budget, approved the budget for 2 years, you can have a review process. So that every year there's a review process.
We will deal with that one at another time, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Sorry, I muddied some ants there and make them bite a little bit too hard. But that's all
No,
right.
sir.
We can
I
get
am,
that.
I am saying to you,
We can get past that.
You can do what you always do. Go on the radio and say what you want to say. I'm giving you an opportunity to get a discussion with the deputy governor, and then you can do what you always do. Go on the radio, say what you want to say. I am not going to mince words with you today, Mr. McLean, because I know, even though we're friends, I do know that there are times when you go on the radio and say what you want to say, even though something different has been said here in the LA.
But
No.
so do you and your people too.
You can have whatever you want to say. I'm giving you the opportunity to meet
So
with the
do
deputy
you.
governor.
And I
and
will
say,
not accept that. I put my own interpretation to what is done here.
You can have it
Now,
your
if
way.
you and your people have a problem with that, then
You can have
that's
it
your
way.
problem too.
I have fulfilled my obligation to give you an opportunity to get the information from the deputy governor. You're refusing. You want it to be done publicly in a court process, and I'm saying finance committee should not be taken as a substitute to the courts across the
Mr.
road.
Chairman, I am not asking for it to be a substitute for the court. God forbid. That's not my job. First of all, I wasn't trained like I'm not a trained lawyer anyway. My job is advocacy. And for me to advocate as a politician, the information must be forthcoming here. If it is sub judice, then that's a different matter. But if you are negotiating with someone, that is not sub judice.
But Mr. McLean, as you've said, your job is to advocate. Your job is not necessarily to advocate publicly if the information is confidential and should not be revealed publicly. Now, the deputy governor has given you an opportunity to speak with him. You want it to be said publicly. Now, I am not going to continue this any further because at the end of the day, our job is to get through the appropriations, and
Chairman, I feel like my responsibilities are being stymied, so that's fine. The public will make that determination, not me.
as I've said, you're free to go on the radio and do as you always do. Mr.
Yeah, and I got to tell them that it was you who stymied it.
Well, they're listening on the radio right now. Mr. Conley,
They'll hear it a
you have
second
question?
time.
You have a question, sir?
I have a few questions, Mr.
Sorry,
Chairman,
Mr.
through you.
Conley, Mr. Miller, I don't know.
No. My name I've been a lot of things have been said last half hour. I had nothing to do it.
Proceed, Mr.
And
Miller.
Mr. Chairman, no. One thing Diaz Admira doesn't do. I don't come down here and ask questions or interfere with processes ongoing in the legislative, in the government, at civil service. I would like the deputy governor to confirm that on the record.
Happy to confirm that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Every question I asked here today, I asked it about general policy, and these are things that are age-old, Mr. Chairman. Now, can I finish yet?
And Mr. Chairman, if I gave that wrong impression about the member, I'm very sorry. He's absolutely right.
I'll wait now till my Miller blood cool down. I'll let Mr. Conley go, and then we'll come back to asking reasonable questions.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Conley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Honorable Deputy Governor. In terms of, again, policy as it regards the strategic human resource services aspect, and when you're planning for the future leaders of Cayman in the civil service, we always talk about succession planning. I've always advocated, and you know this, we've had conversations offline that we should be trying to bring in the best and the brightest. And having heard in this setting a number of references to people acting and that, I wanted to ask if there's been any consideration to fast tracking our best and brightest students, getting them into the civil service by offering them a kind of passageway if they obviously if they produce results and they're acceptable to the service or through whatever mechanisms are put in place, but they get a fast track to a position. So what I'm trying to say is you identify them in school, you offer them scholarship to go away and to take up a certain area of study that's beneficial to the Cayman Islands and to the Cayman Islands government. You bring them back, you put them on a fast track, and they're fast tracked to us for a certain position, and let's say deputy governor designate, right? And it's theirs to lose rather than for them to have to apply for that job down the road. Had those discussions taken place, and if not, can you say why not and what the actual succession plan policy is?
Mr. Chairman, through you. Yes, sir. And just to confirm, the member has made those suggestions to us in the past at one of those regular meetings that I alluded to earlier. And one of the suggestions that was made during that meeting was that there needed to be better collaboration between the portfolio of the civil service and education so that we were targeting some of our scholarship recipients. That has been taken on board and that is being progressed. But in terms of succession planning, we've had some great successes in the civil service recently. I named them all out here in my contribution or my to the Throne speech and budget debate, where we have filled about 4 chief officer level positions. Only one of them was Duncan Mannion being the Auditor General. We just promoted about 7 Caymanians into senior leadership positions in the civil service. So there's some really good things happening in the civil service and things that I'm very proud of in terms of key positions that we have filled. Some of those persons we've been able to recruit in from the in from the outside. One of our recent hires in the Deputy Premier's ministry is a bright young Caymanian that we were able to bring in from the private sector to be a Deputy Chief Financial Officer. But we do want to focus on inside of the civil service and moving people up. So, for example, over the last 2 years, we have been focusing on internships. We had well over 100 Caymanian internships in the civil service last year, and we will have equal or more of that in this year, because we believe that that's where we should be starting, is getting our young people in, getting them exposed. The law makes it very clear right now. The numbers are a little higher, but yes, there's been, that has been something that's been ongoing. That's how I started in the civil service. So yes, but Mr. Chairman, I don't want to make it sound this is something new. This has been ongoing, but we're putting specific emphasis on it to make sure that we're able that those internships can translate into permanent jobs. Thank you. No, sir. So, moving on. What the law allows us to do right now is to move persons who are graduates directly into the civil service without the need to advertise, as what the member was saying. So yes, and that is happening now, where we're getting persons who have came in the summer, worked in the government, worked in the civil service, they've completed, they've come back, and they have now taken up positions without the need to advertise, right into the civil service. They're parachuted in. What I have asked the chief officer to do is that, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, obviously our succession planning has not been at its best. Otherwise, some of the non-Caymanians that we've had to appoint would not be there. So I'm not here to say that we're doing a fantastic job there. there's tremendous needs for improvement. But we have to look at why that has happened. I do not believe that it is something deliberate where we have civil servants who are deliberately not wanting to, identify persons to train them up, whatever. But everyone is super busy, and they're busy carrying on their jobs and dealing with succession planning and other things becomes, unfortunately, sometimes not the priority. What we have seen in the past is that we have developed succession plans, but there's not been that emphasis to make sure that they're properly implemented. We have been changing up the way in which we do business, where we've been appointing persons with specific responsibilities for certain areas. So we can do the madness where we just keep doing things over and over and hoping for a different result, or we can change the way in which we do our business. So we've seen great successes when we have appointed a director of e-government. That's all that person does is focus on e-government. A director of procurement, where the person just focuses on procurement. The chief officer now is looking at whether we can have someone to champion succession planning. That's all they do, is that they focus on ensuring that everyone has a succession plan to keep persons, and then more importantly, making sure that it's happened. And the chief officer is actively dealing with that, and that is something that we want to take forward, because that, I think, Mr. Conley, will deal with some of the concerns that we have had, is that we need to have that driving force. And it's not because there's resistance, but as you know, everyone is busy. We need to have a specifically focus on that. And I do believe that is going to be the game changer for us.
Thank you for that answer, Deputy Governor. And just one other suggestion, and is that you tie it to the performance management of managers, right? And part of their responsibility is to find this talent and refine it and let it grow, right? But I also would like to thank you publicly on behalf of the constituents that have talked to me about the pay stagnation, and that you're looking into that, because there are some cases where it was quite dire, and we spoke offline, and I got your acknowledgement that in some of those specific cases things would be righted. So I'd like to thank you, because again, morale and other things is great, but people are suffering, and any little bit counts. So that's something I'd like to publicly thank you for. I did have one question that I forgot to ask, Mr. Chairman, through you, and this goes back to the suspensions. And we heard 4 years is the longest, but what is the average length of suspensions, of those 31 suspensions? And again, is there any chance or move that could be made to perhaps bring the civil service procedures in terms of suspensions in line with the labor law of the country, and get on an even footing?
Mr. Chairman, through you, I don't have the average time. I've seen some suspensions go from a matter of weeks, where there's an allegation made, the case is investigated and is determined, to, like I said, over 4 years. Where it slows down is when it gets into the court system, and that takes a while. But so, Mr. Chairman, what have we done? I think it's an excellent question. I have instructed chief officers to look very carefully and consider all options before we suspend or put on required leave. So, in other words, is that absolutely necessary? Or could we move the person to another area, depending on what the allegations are? Also, I've asked legal for advice as to whether, when a person has been committed a criminal offense and it's an obvious breach of our procedures in the workplace, whether we can sort of bring that person back to work, put them in another area, and deal with them on the disciplinary charges. So, for example, if we know that someone through a chair at a manager, do we need to wait for the court to prove it, or can we just deal with it internally? No, just to say that's a very example that doesn't happen, okay? But it is something that we know that we need to do better on. In terms of reducing those numbers, it is something that is high on our priority, and we are working hard to make sure that those numbers are reduced quickly.
Thank you, Deputy Governor. Mr. Miller, you've cooled down? Okay.
For this thing.
Okay.
Just to follow up on the suspension. When I was a civil servant and you were suspended for misconduct of whatever reason, you were suspended for half pay. The rationale at that time for half pay as opposed to full pay was that me as the civil servant would have some interest in getting it resolved. When did it change from half pay to full pay? Because at full pay, as long as I can keep making excuses to the court, I'm doing just fine, especially if I got another job.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have the specific date. I think it was possibly over 10 years ago. It's been there for quite some time. I understand the reason why was that persons were being suspended, they were losing their homes, and only to be found out guilty. So it was a decision taken by the government at the time.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, is there a prohibition on the person so suspended on full pay from having other employment in the private sector during that period of time?
Mr. Chairman, through you, that person, I wouldn't say that it is actually a prohibition, but that person would have to seek permission before doing so. Would seek permission from their appointing officer before they're able to get another job.
Getting back to CSAC, Mr. Chairman. What policy, regulation, or legislation, or does any such policy or regulation allow a chief officer to interpret a decision of CSAC to gain compliance, but without doing exactly what CSAC asks them to do?
Mr. Chairman, could I ask the member to repeat that again, please? Sorry.
I can give you a hypothetical. I appeal to CSAC. CSAC say I should have my job back, or I should have gotten the job in the competitive environment that we were in. In order to comply with that specific decision that I should get the job, what regulation or whatever would allow a chief officer to create an equal job for me while keeping the person against whom I appeal in the same job? In order to, in their view, I don't think they've complied with the decision, but it could be argued that they have complied with it.
Mr. Chairman, chief officers have wide discretion when it comes to employment matters. Once they have a budget, they can create positions. They can fill those. I'm not sure there is a particular regulation that does exactly what the member says, but chief officers do have wide discretion.
Would it be an expectation of you as Deputy Governor that a chief officer could use a decision of CSAC in a similar situation to create an equal post, not having made any application for the last 5 years that the department needed those 2 equal posts.
Mr. Chairman, it would depend really on the circumstances. So, for example, if CSAC said to me that I should have promoted, so I promote someone, and one of the unsuccessful candidates says, I think that I should have got promoted, and they appeal, and CSAC says, yes, you should have appointed this individual. So I can't unpromote someone. So the alternative would be to give that other person a similar a position so that I can comply with CSAC. So there could be some statutory limitations that would prevent me from not complying with their wishes in the fullest of sense, but also complying with it so that we meet the objective of their ruling.
Mr. McLean, you were going to ask a question?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I would like to know what is the policy on acting allowance. Sorry if that's personnel matters.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I'm always happy to answer questions on general matters.
On personnel too? HR matters?
Mr. Chairman, I've been answering questions on HR matters all morning.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, the personnel regulations stipulate what are the requirements for acting. So if I am on point, if I'm on grade C, and I'm going to be appointed to act for somebody on grade A, then I would get appointed. The acting allowance would be the difference between my salary and point 1 of the scale in which the person who I'm acting is on.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to know if that's applied equally across the board in every instance in the civil service.
Mr. Chairman, that is the regulation. I would expect it to be complied with, yes, sir.
Mr. McLean, you have a follow-up question?
No, Mr. Chairman, not on that. I don't know if anyone else had any.
Mr. Bernie Bush, you have a question, sir? And then Mr. McKeever Bush.
Back through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Deputy Governor. Back in 80-something, when I was a civil servant, there was a pay raise given to civil servants, and I think it was at that time, I remember Mr. Gilbert McLean was someplace in government, and the top echelon were not given the pay raise. Those of us at the bottom were. I think it was in the late 80s or early 90s, there was a staggered pay raise given to civil servants. This 2.2 that the government has so gratefully, or whatever the word you want, to given to you guys, generously, a big 2.2. Is there any way that you could sit with them and say, well, okay, those below 4,000 a month, those below 5, and those above, we can wait till the next time and we get more. Is there anything that you, as a civil service chief, could have thought about that?
Mr. Chairman, have I thought about it? Absolutely. But I'm not going to create a division in the civil service. Everyone, and I do mean everyone, has been working hard and deserves this. And we are grateful for the government. For me to try to decide arbitrarily which group of persons should get this is not something that I would want to contemplate. Our civil service leaders, 100 of which is done at the Marriott right now, getting leadership, additional leadership training, have done a fantastic job in leading the organization, and I wouldn't want to take this payment away from them.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I guess some of us do know the difference between $2.2 to $3,000 salary and a $12,000 salary. Okay, second question, Mr. Chairman, through you. Mr. Deputy Governor, you must agree that health is a serious thing. And you must, I know you will not disagree with me on that. Health. Health too. Health is a serious thing too. We should take that serious. But health we're talking about right now. There are some things that if you get sickened with, it's a lifelong thing. Mole in your lungs is one. In this chambers, Mr. Chairman, through you, we had the member from East End of them take the chief officer for Community of Affairs and Sports through the ringer for leaving some people in Mole. Mr. Deputy Governor, on your way home this evening, stop at the fire station in West Bay.
I've been there, sir.
You see it. You see it coming through. You can see the green and the rust all around, and it's been condemned by the people. Please, let's not wait to do any research. Just take the fire chief sat here and said, "Oh, these ACs are so old." Well, to me, just pulling out the AC in the duct shouldn't be that hard, but our men should not be subjected to those type of health hazards. They're bad enough when they go to the dump with all the chemicals they have to breathe in. Please, Deputy Governor, look into that. Could you?
I'll happy to get that undertaken, Mr. Chairman.
And the last one,
Is it related to policy advice, Mr.?
yes, sir.
Okay.
We've sat here now and we've heard the older heads in here say that we as elected members never really go in deep. And some feel that this is the reason why some of the civil servants come down here. And if you want to say, stretch or try to skedaddle around and in the process come across if they're hiding something, come across as they even may be lying. That's a strong word to use, but we come across as that. And a perfect example, the member from Northside asked you consequences. We've had a chief officer sat here last year, and the 100 will show this, that a contract had been signed. 2 weeks later, it finally appeared when that chief officer had left and gone on a trip. It finally showed up and it was signed by someone else. Also, another chief officer, 3 years ago, promised me to get me the qualifications for a policy sports, the policy advisor, and has yet to reach me. And I asked you last year, and you said you would get it, and you wrote it down twice. Just sitting now.
Yeah, and you're right about that, sir.
And what policy is there for us? I mean, to deal. I mean, just now I heard yourself say about the argument discussion here was between the chairman's job, who I wouldn't want, and what went on here just now. We have a perfect example, the education ministry. You have parents pressuring us, giving us facts, which you bring down here, on which I refer to as the cartel in the education ministry, which two previous governments, they have done there and done the damage to our children, so much so that the last one standing was the chairman himself to keep his children in our schools, in our public schools. Everybody else has their children in the private schools. Mr. Chairman, through you, what policies there that you're going to deal with these services, in especially a ministry like education, where one bad year can mess up the foundation of a child, for us to rid ourselves of these people that have ruined almost a generation of our children? Is there a policy that we can pay them off, send them on their way, make them go someplace? Is there something, sir? Because this thing about waiting to see if they improved, Mr. Chairman, through you, Mr. Deputy Governor, if these people have not improved in 10 or 12 years, what we're showing now wasn't planted last year or 3 years ago or 4 years ago. So is there a policy that you all can help the education ministry? And I must say, Mr. Chairman, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Deputy Governor, a freeze on civil servants or whatever you call it, understand. But please, in the future, don't give the education ministry or anyone any excuse to say that they don't have the amount of teachers, because we cannot pay for ignorance and we cannot pay for children in Northwood. We can pay for education. But get back to the part. Is there a policy that we can help the minister or the chief officer, whoever's responsible, get rid of these people in the ministry and all these people that have done so much damage to our children quickly? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Mr. Deputy Governor, he said a lot there. I don't know how you want to respond.
Mr. Chairman, there is very clear policies, rules, regulations to deal with persons who do not perform. It has to be proven. So if we have evidence that someone is not performing, that they are actually doing the opposite in terms of what the member just said, which is very serious in damaging our children, then we would want to take quick action against that individual. And the law allows us to do it. But we have to have very clear evidence that we can present to the person, give them a chance to respond, and then deal with it. So that's the rules, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, last one. But Mr. Deputy Governor, a 16-year-old with no SEN, with no special education needs, talk to them. They can't read and write. Isn't that evidence? They're going through the whole system, the curriculum, all the stuff. That's evidence. They haven't done their job. We failed our children. So, and the last, I'm finished after that, but please, on that succession planning person, please hire a Kimanian to do that. Please don't put Peter God to do it too.
Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McKeever Bush.
Mr. Chairman, to the member, can you explain how positions are advertised in a ministerial department for an existing position, that is, in the ministry?
Deputy Governor.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I believe it was last Finance Committee, the member for Northside made some excellent points in terms of, why were we advertising outside the civil service? Should we be focused more on giving people within the civil service opportunities? And we have taken that suggestion on board. So the majority now of posts where it's existing, we believe that it can be filled within. We will advertise internally only, which means that the job advert is circulated within the civil service, and we will only accept applicants for persons who are within the civil service. Now, just to be very clear in what I'm saying, that doesn't happen with every job, but with a lot of jobs, that happens.
And Mr. Chairman, in regards to, and in regards to persons from overseas who has a position, contract is coming to an end, and there are local people available. How is that determined? And I don't expect to get completely into the matters that you had that long dissertation on just now. But you would understand, again, there are complaints made to us, and that that they are not given an opportunity, they say, in that instance.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, we are doing our best to give Caymanians in the civil service opportunities. So, for example, of the 7 persons who we recently promoted into senior positions, 2 or 3 of those persons replaced non-Caymanians. So there was a non-Caymanian in the post. We advertised, Caymanians applied, they were given the jobs. So it's working. Now, a person's on a government contract, they are non-Caymanian, they are non-Caymanian. Normally, they would be required to advertise the job, again, internally first, or maybe externally together, so that we are given our Caymanians every opportunity to compete for these jobs. Now, is every single contract for a non-Caymanian advertised each time it comes up? No.
CFOs, so that sort of positions.
So I am doing my endeavor best to Caymanize all our CFOs, and we are doing, I think, really well. We just employed a Caymanian CFO to replace a non-Cayman CFO. But to Mr. Miller's point is that I want to give Caymanians in the civil service an opportunity first. So if here's how I view this. If a CFO's position come up today, it's a non-Caymanian, and we advertise, only 2 Caymanians apply, only one Caymanian apply from within the civil service, and they get the job, it says to me that there are not a number of Caymanians in the civil service ready and able and want to get the job. So if the next day or 2 days later, another CFO's position comes up, I will say, okay, let us not advertise that one because we just did and we got a Caymanian. Let us give our Caymanians another year or 2 to build up their experience, and then we will advertise. That process is actually working. What I have to be very careful about, Mr. Chairman, is that we have made significant improvements in the quality of our accounts. I don't want to now rush to replace some of the people that got us there until I'm absolutely sure that that outstanding performance is going to continue. But I can give the member my undertaking. It is my desire and that of chief officers to Caymanize all of our CFOs.
And given the situation you just talked about, have you found that situation existing recently? Where people on permits or on contract on both sides, not permits, of course, on contract on both
Right,
sides,
yes, sir.
where you had to keep one of them on to satisfy the condition you just talked about.
I don't remember it being recently. As a matter of fact, the case that happened recently was the one where we replaced a non-Caymanian with a Caymanian. It's not coming to mind, Mr. Chairman. Just recently.
If there are no further questions, we'll proceed to take the vote.
If the
Oh,
member
sorry.
wants to jog my memory, I'm quite happy. I'm just simply not.
No, you just cautioned us about delving into
We can talk
those practical employment conditions. Just to say that we are still receiving that kind of company. That has happened within a couple of months, last 3 months or so.
Okay.
But
I'll look into that, Mr. Bush. Thanks.
thank God that civil servant know that we can't do anything about it as politicians. They're only making us know.
All those in favor of CIV 1, policy advice to the head of the civil service of $1,495,263 standing as part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. CIV 2, auditing compliance with human resource and internal financial policies for $1,531,739. Are there any questions? Mr. McLean?
Mr. Chairman, let me, through you, ask. The Deputy Governor came down here in his budget debate or contribution and said no more Hollywood. Subsequently, and up until today, there has been many people come through here acting. head of department, other employees. Why is that, Mrs. Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. McLean, Deputy Governor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in an organization the size of ours, 3,000 plus persons, there will always be people acting. What I'm very clear about is that we have filled a substantial amount of the cases, of the positions where we have had persons acting in education, in judicial, the collector of customs, the accountant general, the deputy accountant general, the head of the London office, the chief surveyor. There has been so many cases that we have completed, the chief fire officer. I could just keep going on. But there will always be some cases where their persons are acting. So I stand by my decision, by what I said. We have substantially cleared it up. Will it be gone completely at any given time? No.
Mr. Chairman, I never said it would be gone. My concern is the public management law says that persons can, or statute should only act for 1 year. And there are substantial people, members of the civil service, that are in post and has been acting in that post for more than a year. There will always be acting people within 1 year, or people who are acting because other people are off and temporarily filling in the vacancy. So I would like an answer to that. The other one is, under what condition would a head of department be acting for one of the people who work under him?
Mr. Chairman, we are actively working to reduce the number of persons who have been acting, for example, those that have been over a year. But, Mr. Chairman, when, for example, a head of department is on suspension, for example, if the case is before a court and then 4 or 5 people then have to act up because of that head of department, it's beyond our control. Where it is under our control, that is something that I'm actively reviewing now, and we will bring it in line and continue over time to reduce those acting periods, because the member is right. That is, a substantial period of time. He asked in relation to where a head of department would be given an acting allowance to doing a job for somebody under him or her. I can only see where that would happen if there's a statutory post. So if you're doing actually 2 jobs, you may be given, I'm not sure you'll be given an acting allowance, you may be given a duty allowance if you're taking on additional duties. But I'm not entirely clear when that would happen. Again, happy to get the information from the member and look into it.
I can give it to you now on phone. I have nothing to hide. But since the chairman said that I should be more circumspect, I like making sure it's out in the open. But Mr. Chairman, that's interesting, his response. Because obviously, going up the ladder, you don't get it. But now those at the top of the ladder, who's responsible for those people, for the underlings, well, that's not the right word, but the staff, if one of their staff is incapacitated, and it appears permanently, they get acting allowances or duty allowances?
Mr. Chairman, I think what the member is referring to is a duty allowance. So obviously, if I am doing my job and I am asked to do another job in addition to mine, then that would normally attract a duty allowance. Normally, you wouldn't ask someone to do 2 jobs.
A head of department?
Is that a question?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow. No wonder people clamor to go to the civil service. I bet you won't get it in the private
They're
sector.
a great employer, sir.
A great one for some people.
Are there any further questions? If not, we proceed to vote.
Aye.
All those in favor of CIV2,
Aye.
auditing compliance with human resource and internal financial policies for $1,531,739, standing as part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. CIV3, management of public sector reform, $1,262,219. Are there any questions?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Mr. Chairman, earlier, in an answer to the 5th elected member for Georgetown, the Deputy Governor said that they are taking on board the idea to go out and recruit our top academic performers. In developing the policy to complete that, is it the intention to stick within the confines of the current education scholarship of the inadequate $20,000 per year? Or is there room for government, because they've identified a specific need for which they're going to train a specific person, to offer full scholarships, as opposed, because there are very few places you can go today, and I wouldn't recommend that the government send people who are top academic performers to institutions that $20,000 can pay the tuition, living expenses for the year. Is there an intention to include in the development of that policy where you will offer these young Caymanians full scholarship, including transportation, board and lodge allowances, and scholarships to the top universities? I'm talking about Oxford and Yale and Harvard and Princeton and places like that. $100,000 a year.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask the Chief Officer to answer that.
Mr. Chairman, Gloria McPhail-Nixon, Chief Officer for the Portfolio of the Civil Service, through you. I'd like to thank the member for pointing out this recommendation as we are reviewing our policy to be able to recruit top talent into the civil service. The member is aware that we've had recent successes for some time now. We have had our law that allowed us to directly take on board persons who had recently graduated on scholarships, even without having to advertise those positions. But we do know that there are certain skill sets that are in high demand within the civil service, and in some cases are in rare supply within the community, the private sector. So we will certainly take this on board. We've been working more closely with the Education Council to be aware of returning graduates. Like other honorable members of this House, we do attend the graduation program, so we have an idea of what our young people are graduating from high school and their aspirations there, particularly through our internship programs, but also through the local universities. So we're trying to be more proactive in the way that we are targeting talent even earlier. Our Project Future programs, our 5-year strategic plan, and even the conventional work of the civil service, where we're talking about digitizing the way we do our services and offering e-government, means that the types of skill sets that we're really looking for now in particular are persons with IT backgrounds and persons with commercial skills. So where we have identified that these are certainly things that we can train our civil service to do, but that the lag that's involved in trying to do that purely from within, we are looking at ways that we might be able to attract that type of talent from the persons who are heading off to school. So it isn't a part of our current strategy to augment the scholarships that are otherwise offered from the Ministry of Education through their Education Council, but we will certainly take that on board because we know, based upon our existing skill sets within the civil service and even what we see in the talent pipeline coming through Education Council, that there still are going to be skill sets that we have high demand for, but that are currently in rare supply. And the only alternative then would be for us to go further overseas to fill those skill sets. An example of that, we've recently been recruiting for an auditor with an IT background, so someone who has the ability to audit our IT programs. Those types of very particular jobs will require that we be more creative in the approach that we take to making sure we have those skills available to us in Cayman. So we can certainly take that on board, and in addition to the collaboration that we currently have with the Ministry of Education, look to see if there aren't ways that we might be able to offer augmented scholarships for persons who are specifically, to the member from Georgetown's point, on a fast track into the civil service to identify priority positions that we aren't able to fill through the traditional approaches we've taken in the past. So we certainly take that on board, and we'll look at that as we are further looking at the talent available to us and developing our succession plans for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McFeel Nixon. Mr. Miller?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. When is it expected that this policy will be finalized and put in place? Is it are you in a position to have it done with high school graduates this year? Or are you looking to have this in place for high school graduation next year in June?
Ms. Nixon?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. As part of our 5-year strategic plan, one of these 5 pillars or strategic areas of the plan relates to talent management. Our current priority is obviously focusing on the persons that we have within the civil service. Our budget speaks to our ability to support their onward development. However, we will be expounding on our existing policies. So I would anticipate that while this year's plan calls for us to be able to offer increased paid internships to persons who are graduating, and for us to be able to have an increased penetration in terms of the persons that we take on board as returning graduates, it would have to be in a future budget cycle unless there was some very significant changes to either our resources or our existing priorities to allow us to also be able to offer scholarships, because as you would imagine, those are significant investments. What I can tell you that we have taken on board in the past 2 years, and more specifically this past year, is offering free bachelor's degree programs to our Caymanian honor students of the Civil Service College. So we are currently offering scholarships for people to obtain persons who have demonstrated a commitment to the civil service and a commitment to continuing their education. Our current budget allows us to be able to offer them fully sponsored bachelor's degree programs in an area of their choice, as long as that is an area that is applicable within the civil service at UCCI. What the member has alluded to is an expansion of that current policy to be able to go towards persons outside of the civil service in attracting talent. Our current budget does not contemplate that, but that is certainly something that we would be willing to evaluate as part of our talent management strategy in the 16-17 year, and something that we would hope then, if we had full support, to be able to take forward in our next year's budget.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, you have a follow-up?
So none of the, I think the Minister of Education has 15-point-something million in scholarship. None of that has been ring-fenced to be offered to recent top high school graduates for specific talent development as opposed to talent management, development and recruitment as opposed to talent management. for this group of civil servant, of graduates this year?
Mr. Chairman, through you, I don't think that the member's summary is what I was saying. I
No,
believe
through
that
you, Mr. I understand that most of what she said relates to talent, management, retention of what you and the development of what you already have. That's not what my original question was about. That's not what Mr. Connolly recommended in the meetings that he and I were in, because I supported his recommendation. What Mr. Connolly and I recommended was that the government develop a deliberate policy to going to the high school and getting the top academic graduates to be trained for specific specialized positions in government that require high level academic ability to achieve, and all at university degree, master's, PhD. That is the policy that we're talking about having the civil service develop. I don't have any problems with all you said about talent management, talent development, and talent retention around the areas that you talk about. What I believe we need is, in addition to that, because you can't do very much now about those that are returning graduates in terms of these specific specializations that you need. But I believe that there are quite a number of positions in the higher echelons of the civil service that we need to recruit top academic talent from the high school, fund them properly to go to the best possible available universities to get that specialized training that they need for that position, and that they are identified as long as they complete their academic thing, they come back in the summers, they work, but they are designated for that position, and as long as they meet the performance criteria academically and when they are on the job, they know that that's the job that they're going to get when they have invested all this time and effort to get the academic qualification.
through you, Mr. Chairman, if I could just clarify what I was saying, because I think the member had two aspects of the question. He is correct that we have in past meetings had discussions about having closer links to Education Council, and specifically the recommendation, as I recall it, was that we ensure that in the priority areas that are being funded by Education Council, that the talent needs within the civil service were included amongst those priorities, so that the scholarships that were given could be linked. I'd just like to, if I may, just because there's two aspects, so that those could be closer linkages made. And it was that those conversations, those linkages have started to happen, but are happening in tiers. So the very first tier that has been improved this year was to look at the returning graduates, not just in terms of those that have completed their degrees, but also those who are in the midst of undertaking those degrees, so that we can get them in early in their programs, to have them have the summer internships and to begin to be linked to specific jobs within the civil service that they can take up when they come back. The second question was about for persons who are, the second aspect was relating to persons who are about to undertake their studies and would be undertaking their studies in areas that are of high relevance within the civil service, whether we would augment by offering particular scholarships for civil service careers, whether we would augment the existing offer by the Education Council to increase the scholarship amounts, because there was concerns that those might be inadequate, and if those were priorities within the civil service, would we augment it? It was on that latter point that I've said that this was not something we had discussed previously in terms of increasing the funding for persons who are undertaking studies, but that is something that we would certainly look at and examine this year. We are offering full scholarships for persons to obtain their first degree. It is currently limited to those who are currently within our civil service, but we have begun conversations with Education Council for persons who are on scholarships, And the next level of that was going to be to make sure that the jobs and the skill sets that I referred to previously, that those were being included in the Education Council's consideration of policy, priority funding areas for persons to, in the first place, receive scholarships, so that the amount that was, the funding, the investment that was being made in being able to upskill our children to take on future jobs, that the civil service careers were being given consideration when they were prioritizing their spend and support for persons to pursue degrees. But to that issue about whether we would be looking to increase or to offer further subsidized training for persons who were willing to pursue their studies in areas that were of high relevance within the civil service, that is not something that we have had discussions on, and it's not something that's reflected in this year's budget. It is something that we are very open to considering, but as you would imagine, those are significant investments that would be very difficult for us to accommodate without a decision about our existing priorities or about additional funding. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Macfield Nixon. Mr. Miller, did you have another question? Okay. All those in favor of CIV 3, Management of Public Sector Reform for $1,262,219, standing as part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. CIB 7, Civil Service College, $846,287. Are there any questions? All those in favor of CIB 7, Civil Service College for $846,287, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. CIB 8, Human Resource and Accounting Services for $1,289,156. Are there any questions? All those in favor of CIB 8, Human Resource and Accounting Services for $1,289,156, standing as part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. CIB 10, Servicing of the Legislative Assembly and Members of the Legislative Assembly for $1,716,216.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Miller, Mr. Bush is giving way to you. Okay, Mr. Bush, Mr. Miller is giving way. Okay, Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I believe that all of us, including the Deputy Governor, will agree that this sound system we have in this Legislative Assembly is archaic, to be putting it mildly. We have to wait weeks, months to get copies of Hansard's printed. Can I ask the Deputy Governor if he would consider trying to find money in this year's budget to replace the sound system in this Legislative Assembly, to wire the desks with electricity and charging points for all those who want to lose their electronic stuff, and that such an upgrade in the sound system include voice recognition, so that we don't have to pay nobody in Washington to type our Hansard. In the state of Washington, you can get it within minutes of speaking. It's scrolled down and it's typed up.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Deputy Governor.
Mr. Chairman, I can confirm that there's money in capital now for this upcoming budget to do just that in terms of replacing the sound system, and I will pass on the suggestion in terms of the add-ons that the member thinks. I think we all agree that that's important, especially the PowerPoints, which we're all walking around here trying to find a place to charge our phones. So I think that is a great idea, and I'll certainly pass that on as well.
I see big headlines.
Mr.
LA system upgraded.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Okay, Mr. Makiba Bush, then Mr. Bernie Bush.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to talk about the same thing. Basically, mine has been answered.
Mr.
I'm sick of this one falling pieces. This has been for Miss Annie time.
Mr. Chairman, through you, what is the status on this house going independent of you?
Mr. Chairman, there was a committee formed. The work has been completed, and draft regulations or draft bill has been handed over to our elected leaders, and the Premier is now taking it forward. Sorry, just to say, when I said the elected leaders, I meant the elected government here. It wasn't given to everybody in the House. I'm not aware of that. Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, the committee met, we produced a draft, was it a draft bill?
Framework, anyway.
A draft framework, yes. Sorry, that's a better word, thank you. Which has now been presented to the government for them to consider. But in terms of the meetings and my part of it, that's now with the elected government.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Chairman, just to wait on the Premier to give us copies to see what's happening.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's left for the Premier to discuss it with his caucus and his members, and then to take it forward.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I
Thank
thought
you.
that would have been the whole House, but thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bush, you have a question?
No, no.
Okay. All right. All those in favor of CIB 10, servicing of the Legislative Assembly and members of the Legislative Assembly for $1,716,216, standing as part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. CIB 11, servicing and support for Her Excellency the Governor, $956,598. Are there any questions?
Yeah, plainly, but kind of free to encroach upon her privacy.
All those in favor of CIB 11, servicing and support for Her Excellency the Governor for $956,598, standing as part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Mr. Chairman, before you go, they might want to look at the numbers because there is a slight reduction in the amount of money, but there's no reduction in the days for maintenance, and there's no reductions in invitations prepared and issued. So unless they're going to use a poorer quality paper, I don't know how they're going to manage it.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, we take the vote. How last part is.
All those in favor of CIB 11, servicing and support for Her Excellency the Governor for
Aye.
$956,598, standing as part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. CIB 12, preservation and management of records, $1,607,635. Are there any questions?
Aye.
All those in favor of CIB 12, preservation and management of records for $1,607,635, standing as part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. CIB 13, maintenance of the electoral register, $1,982,000. Are
Mr.
there any
Chairman?
questions? Mr. Bush?
Mr. Chairman, can the member advise us, bring us up to date on where they're at with preparations, particularly so seeing that they're going to this disaster called One Man, One Vote? Tell me how far he's reached and what kind of preparations are being made to educate our people on how to do this.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I will have the Deputy Supervisor of Elections here, and I will ask her to take that question.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. The election program started in May.
Ms. Bothwell?
Suzanne Bothwell, Deputy Supervisor of Elections. The electoral program started in May with the launch of the registration program and campaign and the new website for the elections office. And that campaign has been aired on TV, on the radio, and that is something that's going to continue until May to try to increase the registration numbers. In July, to perhaps about the end of September, the elections office will be doing a voter verification exercise whereby the elections office, in collaboration with the Economics and Statistics Department, with their guidance and input, will be going door to door to all the registered voters in the island to verify their address, to ensure if they, and to hand out pamphlets about the new voting system and the one man or one person, one vote system and the electoral district system that's going to be put in place next year. Legislative changes are in their final stages in the sense that drafting is now being wrapped up. We've just had quite a lengthy meeting with the draftsman, so we do anticipate that very early July, that proposal will be put to cabinet, and then a bill should be forthcoming to the legislative, to the members and to the public.
Thank you.
So, a public campaign will begin. Other than the avenues you talked about just now.
Public campaign, a general education and awareness is commencing in a staged process. There is a plan for that takes us right to end of May, and it involves all users of the elections, whether it is the members of the public who are not yet registered voters, existing registered voters, proposed candidates, those who are going to participate as officers, and we have started training, and we have, I think, 3/4 of the elections team already identified.
Mr. Chairman, are there going to be meetings held by the elections officials in the districts to inform from that point of view and answer questions from that point of view?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chairman. I cannot say right now that has been part of the plan. We were planning on going on the radio, and to the election supervisor is, I think, at the elections office full time. But we were hoping that the verification exercise would have been kind of to launch that process. But I do see the value in what is being asked, and I think it would be a good idea, perhaps, to actually include that as part of the education program, to have a circuit around the island closer to the election period.
Mr. Chairman, I suggest that's going to be very much needed, because in Georgetown there's 7 electoral districts now, or constituencies, if you want to call them, in the District of Georgetown, and mine, West Bay, has 4. Others have likewise. And people need to understand their boundaries. People need to know where they're going to have to vote and what it means. And, you have to do that by, thank God, television, thank God for radio, and even social media as such. But, there are thousands of people that will not reach. And there is already a lot of confusion. And I'm concerned about low turnouts because people are confused to that extent. There's a whole lot of work that needs to be done in regards to elections. I mean, what I observed the last time is completely some differences in what I've known over the years according to what I was told was law. I mean, you had candidates in the lines talking to people in the lines going into the polling booth. I mean, before I had a hold on my head. I couldn't look at nobody. I couldn't speak to anyone. But that's what I was told by officials then. Now, candidates, I said that in my district, and I don't venture outside of West Bay on election day. So I pay quite a bit of attention, especially last time that we had these so-called observers down here. That's the other question I need to ask. Are there plans to bring observers in this election?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I have no instructions on that from the supervisor, but I certainly will raise that question with him.
Yeah. I don't see why you need to, but maybe this is the time that you would have observers because you are going into a new system. Last time, I didn't know what the world they were doing here, but anyhow, they were here. Sounded like they only had one name on their lips. McKeown Bush. Anyway, Mr. Chairman, I would plead with them to make sure that there is some at that level to reach people at all possible ways in the various constituencies. West Bay West, and I speak about West Bay because I know it best. West Bay West, West Bay Northwest, Central, and South. You agree with me, cuz?
Thank
you
you,
know
Mr.
how we missed it
Thank you,
too late
Mr.
last
Bush.
night. I know that.
If there are no further questions, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of CIV 13, maintenance of the electoral register for $1,982,000, standing as part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
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 Those against, no. CIV 14, support for commissions, $1,286,220. Are there any questions? All those in favor of CIV 14, support for commissions for $1,286,220, standing as part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. CIV 15, policy advice and administrative support provided to the Deputy Governor for $395,123. Are there any questions?
What is the difference between 15 and 1? The deputy governor is the head of the civil service, right? Or is it the governor? Which one? No, that's because you have policy advice to the head of the civil service and then policy advice and administrative support provided to the deputy governor.
Yes.
So,
Mr. Chairman, I can
more or less
answer.
the same thing? I mean, I don't have no question, I just...
No, Mr. Chairman, it's different. So policy advice to the head of the civil service is what I get from the portfolio of the civil service. And
From
this
the
one
portfolio.
is
Sorry, from the portfolio.
Yes.
That's the difference then.
That's the
All right.
difference. This one is actually my office where we deal with naturalizations and everything. This one here.
15.
This 15. Sorry.
15.
Yes, sir.
All those in favor of CIV 15, policy advice and administrative support provided to the Deputy Governor for $395,123, standing as part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. CIN 2, health insurance for civil service pensioners, $31,712,156. Are there any questions?
No.
Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, last Finance Committee, I asked the Deputy Governor to look at the possibility of combining the civil service pensioners with current civil service employees and seek insurance for that group, because I believe that there should be some savings in the premiums if what you're paying to Cineco is an actual premium. Was that exercise done, or?
Deputy, Ms. Matfield-Nixon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. Since the last Finance Committee, there have been a number of policy initiatives which have impacted the way that we're looking at our retiree group, particularly those who continue to work with the civil service. The proposal underway, which this House will consider shortly, to raise the retirement age, and I know this is something, Mr. Chairman, that you've spoken of at length as well, will mean that we will be able to reintegrate those persons who are currently retirees but working within the civil service back within our active population by raising the retirement age to 65. But there's been a second initiative that's been undertaken, an initiative led by Cineco, which has looked at the way that they deal with the premium allocation. And they've done a risk assessment based upon age bands. So what they have done is actually looked at charging different rates, not based upon their activity per se in terms of whether or not you were a pensioner or a civil servant, but based upon the age of the individuals within our program. We're still having some very pointed discussions with them about the outcome of that exercise. Obviously, with increasing the retirement age and the larger retention of mature persons within our workforce, this could result. We've seen in the past 2 years the average age within the civil service increasing. So 2 years ago, the average age was 42, and in 15-16, we're looking at that. Sorry, 14-15, we were looking at that being 43. So we obviously want to make sure that the approach that they're taking to the premium allocation is one that, to the member's point, is going to help us to realize the best overall outcome. We have a relatively small retiree group versus a very large and I dare say overall healthy population within the civil service. So the idea that the member has put forward makes very good sense in terms of being able to consider that in totality. So we're looking at the current proposal, which I understand was intended to decrease the premiums within the civil service to ensure that that different approach, so that there was an exercise that was done to review the way that we are looking and assessing risk for our insured employees and former employees who are now retired. We are still trying to we're paying very close attention to the analysis now of those numbers that have come out to ensure that they've actually taken us in the direction that we want to. And I think the jury is still out on that in terms of whether it delivers the savings that were intended. So a review has taken place. We want to make sure that it's doing what we had hoped it would achieve, which is to actually deliver savings on behalf of our total insured group.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I would caution an analysis for health insurance where you're putting the emphasis on age banding. I think there's a reason why insurance in the private sector is total population, although there are other risks, but the premium is set on total population. There are other risk factors other than age banding. And the other suggestion that I made last year and the year before and the year before and the year before was whether government is looking at any kind of reinsurance, catastrophic insurance for some of these senior people, where to reduce the risk and also to reduce the premium.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Ms. McFeel-Nixon.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, could the member just clarify what he meant by the catastrophic risk insurance that he was talking about? I just want to make sure that my response is touching on the point that he's raising.
For instance, if you one of your civil servants, or I guess it's possible even with in the police, has a premature baby, right, which is going to look at million plus, whether you look at having an AFLAC type thing, and where that risk is laid off separately, right, and where you above a certain ceiling, say $500,000 on a senior citizen, your reinsurance takes over, as opposed to coming out of your funds.
Ms. McFeel-Nixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the member for the clarification. The civil service, as some members will be aware, currently enjoys a very healthy premium coverage. Our lifetime cap on coverage is currently set at $5 million. Now, what we have found in looking at our claim history is that has never been even close to being approached. But what it has done has driven up not so much our cost, because it is such a low risk. It hasn't been an actual major factor in terms of the cost of the premiums that we have realized. But what it has impacted, we have discovered, is the projections in terms of the way that our post-retirement medical risk is assessed from an accounting perspective. So what we have realized, sir, is that when we're looking at over $1 billion that has been assessed as the potential outlay that the government might have to face in the future, a significant component of that, the actuaries have advised us, is that cap, because it is such a significant coverage. And when we weigh that against the actual likelihood or incident of that type of risk being triggered, we're actually, from the purposes of the actuarial evaluations, we're actually taking a bigger hit than the risk is in terms of the reason that such a high coverage is put in place to begin with. So just like any person that's insured, we're going to have to assess what is our appetite for self-coverage, self-insurance of some of these very low likelihood of persons that would go to such high limits over a lifetime. Even the incidents, and we have them, regrettably, we do have what the member referred to in terms of premature births that take place. And when those types of things, burn victims, perhaps some of the cancers that have to be treated through experimental treatments, those incidents occur, they can skew towards the much higher coverage amounts, but even in those cases, they don't approach anywhere near what our current lifetime maximum coverage provision is. What it is impacting, as I've said, is very significantly, and I believe the actuaries have said even perhaps in the region of a 20% impact on the way that they assess our future liabilities, that one provision does have a significant impact in the way they assess that from an accounting perspective. So we're trying to strike the balance to make sure that our members, our insured persons, have adequate insurance without having the unforeseen consequences to the way for accounting purposes. And we know the pressures that are being brought to bear in some quarters from audit communities for that to be reflected in our books, that it doesn't have that unforeseen consequence. We're not actually providing persons with that figure by providing $5 million. It doesn't actually mean that there are persons who are approaching it, but then it's having negative consequences in terms of the way that our accounts are being, the liability is being assessed from an actuarial perspective. So we're going to be, like I said, engaging very closely, and this is part of the civil service transformation projects, is modernizing terms and conditions, getting to better understand our needs in terms of insurance coverage, and to understand what are all of the implications in the type of coverage or policy that we implement in terms of things such as the actuarial valuations that are taking place. We believe we can still provide more than adequate coverage without having to have that ripple effect in terms of over $1 billion that's currently been assessed for our post-retirement and total medical liability for our employees, largely because of provisions that relate to that one feature, that $5 million lifetime cap. So we are reviewing it, and we understand that we have obligations for our employees, even persons who face regrettably catastrophic events such as the member described. We're just going to ensure that we meet that obligation in a way that is most cost effective and favorable to our overall considerations. And that's our challenge, and one that we are very much well in progress to achieve.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, any follow-up questions? You good? All those in favor of CIN2, health insurance for civil service pensioners for $31,712,156, standing as part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. NGS 20, Employee Assistance Program for $218,000. Are there any questions? All those in favor of NGS 20, Employee Assistance Program for $218,000, standing as part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. Looking at the remaining appropriations, are there likely to be any questions, or should we just take those in block? Which one is that, sir?
I have one on OE 99.
OE 99? Okay. So should we just proceed to take the others in block, and then we'll come back to OE 99?
I so move.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor of OE 2, personal emoluments for Her Excellency the Governor, Premier, Deputy Premier, Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, Ministers, elected members of the Legislative Assembly, and Deputy Governor, 5,182,000. OE 19, ex gratia recipients plan payments for $2,070,000. OE 71, Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, $187,000. OE 100, depreciation of the portfolio of civil service executive assets, $255,006. OE 107, Project Future Program, $400,000. OE 108, pay stagnation, $1,989,000. OE 109, Public Ombudsman, $290,000. And EI 35, Portfolio of the Civil Service, for $508,000. Standing as part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Mr. Chairman,
Aye.
I just wondered, though, Mr. Chairman, the vote can go ahead, but why the Attorney General is not, is that a separate vote? Separate vote, okay, understood.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, you have a question now? Okay. All those in favor of all that I've just read, standing as part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no.
See how good we treat you?
I'm treating you good
Him.
too. Those against, no. All right, Mr. Bush.
99.
OE 99.
Just, Mr. Chairman, this says ex gratia payment for former members of the Assembly. Last year it was 12, so obviously it was $1,000 per month. And so this budget is 18,000. How many people this covering?
Ms. McField Nixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is, this is a fail-safe, as it were. As the member is aware, there is currently a bill that is proposed to be debated by the House during this sitting to specifically change the pensions law for parliamentarians. That provision would mean that former parliamentarians who served only, were less than 2 full terms, so they served at least 1 full term, but did so prior to the current eligibility that's set out in our current pensions law being applicable, those persons would then be covered and would have access to our pensions fund, not this appropriation that you see here, but would be pensioners who would be paid through the Parliamentarians' Pensions Fund. This OE was a provision in place to make sure that the existing 1 parliamentarian that we had recognized, even if there had been a delay with the law, that there were provisions to continue to honor that existing commitment. But the intention is that we would stop drawing money from this particular line item, and the persons would be accessing a pension from the Parliamentarians' Pension Plan.
Understood. I have questions on the parliamentary the bill, but that will be done by the House because I can't figure out where you go. You're stopping at 2004 for, but for the House. This why is it only 1 person that is getting this funding? I go on the radio too and call in and support people, but I don't mean that special dispensation should be made for them. You got at least 4 persons, just in case I don't know, at least 4 people that served a term or less, right? In some instances, less.
Not through. Through you, Mr. Chairman. There are numerous persons, and I would like to say, sir, that it is not less than 1 year, 4 years. It is 1 term, and it has. This is the provision, the eligibility criteria that is currently established, and I believe it's been established since 2004. And I'm sorry, I'm going for recollection. The honorable member made reference to why there's a specific cutoff date in the law, and it's because what we're trying to do is to regularize. We're trying to provide the same eligibility criteria that members in this honorable House would be eligible to receive, to apply that retroactively to persons who served prior to that eligibility criteria being established. So there was a cutoff period when the law changed, and persons who served from that point forward enjoyed the ability, when they reached retirement age, provided they had served at least one complete term, to be able to receive a pension. And so we've linked it up to that date where that law had changed, and basically providing a retroactive coverage so that persons who served these islands previously and had done so for the eligibility criteria of at least one full term, that they also could enjoy that same benefit. We currently have one former member of this legislative assembly who we have who's applied for and received permission to be considered, and there's a specific appropriation for that. We are aware of at least one other person who has come forward, who we are currently processing and will be taking through the normal channels.
I don't understand the maths. 18,000 is presumably, just like it's a fail-safe but it's for one person. Right. So what happens with the other person?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, again.
One person been getting the $1,000 per month from last year. Last year, June, last year budget was the first time I saw that vote.
Correct. Our current year's budget that
Yeah,
concludes.
it's not finished yet, yeah.
Yes, would be the first time that this appropriation has appeared in the budget. What I would say through you, Mr. Chairman, is that this will fall away. We do not anticipate spending the $18,000.
I understand that.
Yes.
But it is still that one person. As I'm saying, I'm not understanding the maths. And you've done a good job of explaining this. But, you know, we were paying from the second amendment to this bill in 1985. We included the persons from 1959. That area, all the people were getting. That was done in the that amendment. This was an amendment between 2004 and 5, and that's the one you was between 9 and 12, and that was the one you were speaking to. An amendment then. Anyway, that's passed. My concern still is, if you have one person you're paying, all right, and we've been doing that for 1 year, there's somebody else, but this is this is a safe. Suppose it don't happen. Where does the funding for that next person? Or I know of at least should be 3. But anyway, what will happen to the vote then? You will find the funds, but you only voted with one person in mind.
Mr. Chairman, through you.
You shouldn't be answering that. That's all right, darling. Leave it alone. You done well.
Okay.
Done well in answering.
Let us proceed to vote then. All those in favor of OE 99, ex gratia payment, former members of the Legislative Assembly for $18,000, standing as part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. And I think this is an opportune time to take the lunch break.
Mr.
We'll
Chairman,
resume.
Mr. Chairman, could I just ask one question, sir?
Yes, sir.
Beg your indulgence.
Sure.
We have Ms. Susan Bothwell here, who is our new court administrator. She is scheduled for some training right now. I'm just wondering whether she needs to come back this after lunch for the vote for the judicial administration. I know normally members don't ask questions on that, but I'm just wondering whether there could be an indication.
I'm moving block. I mean, it may be other members, but they're not right here right now. But I would certainly move in block that
The
to
rest
really
of these-
allow the staff to go.
Yes.
Thank you. So it appears that she doesn't have to come back. She can go on to the training. So let's take the vote now. Let's take the vote before the break.
Mr. Chairman, I do believe that members have questions for the AG, but on the court, I
Yeah.
would move.
Appropriations to the Chief Justice, yeah.
Move in block.
So let us do so. All those in favor of JAD one, administrative support to the judiciary for $1,878,100. JAD two, support for court proceedings, $6,854,610. JAD three, collection of revenue for $689,211. JAD four, financial management of court funds, $633,957. HEA eight, autopsy and coroner services, $360,000. NGS two, legal aid services, $3,990,000. OE one, personal emoluments for the judiciary, $3,019,099. OE four, judiciary expenses, $1,394,503. OE 43, depreciation of judicial executive assets, $139,146. OE 65, Court of Appeal expenses, $800,000. OE 57, bank charges, $1,500. And OE 102, new courthouse project, $200,000. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. Thank you. We will now take the lunch break and we will reconvene at 2:30 p.m.